Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today we are going to be looking at the best decks in Historic Best of 3, the Historic format on Arena. We're going to be looking at Untapped GG for our companion tool stats. So this will give us a bunch of user win rates, aggregate them, give us a kind of forecast in terms of where the decks are, what's being played, and what can kind of push you into Mythic rank early in the season. So one thing to note, because it's only like a couple weeks or like 10 days after the season, there's not a huge density of folks in the higher rankings. And with Historic Best of 3, it's not the largest density of games. So you'll see some kind of high win rates, things in like the high 80s, 90s. There's some folks who do maintain that type of win rate with some of these decks. It's a little bit, I don't want to say easier, but there's a bigger spread just in terms of power level. Some people just play jank in Historic, while others play like very spiky, like Modern Horizon 3 block decks that we've seen in the past with like energy and stuff like that. So focus more on what the decks are doing. These are all decks that can win more games than they lose. So that's something to just keep in mind as we go through the games. So popularity of the day, what we have on the screen. Mardu Sacrifice is the most played deck right now, but quarter of your games. And then Devotion, there's kind of two flavors. There's the mono green, there's Selesnya. The only difference is Elish Norn in the main board of the deck. Again, because there's not like a huge amount, we're not getting that spread, but there's some cool decks that we're going to be looking at today. All the deck lists will be pasted in the video description, so you can jump to there. If you want to use Untapped, the link for Untapped is also in the video description. So we will jump in, folks. So we are going to look Platinum to Mythic rank. Like I said, for the last week, it's only about 5,800 games, which isn't huge in terms of volume of games, but there's some cool archetypes that are starting to kind of come out from the ashes. That would be Boros Energy being like 90% of the meta. And we're going to start with Jeskai Lotus. One thing just for today's video, I got to raise a ticket with the Untapped guy. For whatever reason, when I do this view, it's just every card, no CMC. So we do have to kind of look at it in this way here. So this is Jeskai Lotus, and this one had a surprisingly 95% win rate over 19 games, so they lost like one game. And this deck here is built around the effects of Strict Proctor and then ideally Lotus Field. So Strict Proctor will mean that you don't need to sacrifice cards to your Lotus Field because you can counter the trigger ability. It also means with things like Null Drifter, you could evoke it and the sacrifice trigger goes on the stack and you don't pay for it, and then you just get to keep the 4/4 around. The draw card effect is a cast trigger, so you still get that. Similar with Flage, you can do it so you don't have to sacrifice it. When it ETBs, if you don't have the subsequent mana to pay the 2, it won't give you the Lightning Helix, but you don't have to sacrifice it. The rest of this deck is a Jeskai control deck. You have Teferis, Prismatic Ending as a cheap flexible removal options. Lorien helps you find lands and can be card draw later. Invert Polarity as a counter, No More Lies. You also have the ability to either stifle or consign to memory the trigger from the Lotus Field. So it gives you multiple ways on turn 2 to counter the Lotus Field. So you can go from turn 3 on top with 5 mana, which is pretty good. This will also work nicely with like Planeswalker. Say your opponent down takes Karn or something like that. You can counter that ability. And then just cheap removal, March of the Otherworldly Light, Fragment Reality mixed into there. You'll also have Monumental Henge to help you dig for some of your legendaries. And then Arena Glory works really, really nicely with Flage just to give it haste and just huge damage out of nowhere. Sideboard gives you Temporary Lockdown, a card that will likely see a little bit more play in this format. There's just a lot of Lurrus decks. Works really nicely against the Mardu Sac deck. You can hit Goblin Bombardment, any sort of like hate pieces. For Graveyard Hate, Wrath of Skies is another flexible way to kind of blow up things. Be mindful, Wrath of Skies can blow up your Temporary Lockdown in some instances. Test Talents as a counter, Surgical for Graveyard Hate, Combo Hate, Dovin's Veto, more counters, just Invert Polarity. Against the kind of mid-range control mirrors, you can bring in Tajik, because they'll usually take out removal. This gives you another angle of attack, Pithing Needle for activated abilities. So there's actually another list I want to show. So this one is from S. Giulio. They went 28 and 8, so it's another similar concept to this list, but this one's got a small energy package to it. So we have the Doorkeeper Thralls in place of the Strict Proctor. So you still have the Null Drifter, Flage. This one's a little bit more like mid-range tempo focused. You have Hushbringers in here that also works with death triggers. Again, apologies for this view this week. I'm going to get them to see if they can fix it. Galvanic in here is cheap removal, Flage, Reprieve for tempo elements. You have Tameo in here that can flip from like a Null Drifter, and then it just kind of shuts down all these small aggro decks. Spell Snare, Get Lost, Tune the Narrative as cheap interaction, Expressive Iteration as card advantage, Wrath the Skies as sweepers. So kind of a more mid-rangey oriented build. You have things like Invert Polarity in the side, Jace the Mind Sculptor, just for kind of the mid-range control mirrors, Tajik again, Divine Purge as a sweeper, Vetoes, you have the Surgicals, and Thraben Charm. Just a really flexible card. Really, really like this card. So that gives you another idea of the list. We then go to Mardu Sacrifice. This one's at 92%. This deck's very, very strong right now. I've been playing it in best of one, and it, like, other than just turn 3 Belcher in best of one or like turn 2 Persist, I win much more than I'm losing with this deck. So we have the nerf Guide of Souls. Doesn't really matter because it's more just the life gain element. While you can pop them, you give them flying, the life gain just helps offset some of the like pain lines in this deck because the mana base is a little rough. But you're using a sacrifice package. So you have like Apprentice, Marionette Apprentice that gives you 2 bodies. Then you can kind of Blood Artist your opponent, Goblin Trap Finder, and Unlucky Witness both provide card advantage through various means. You've claimed the Firstborn to steal your opponent's stuff. Corrupted Conviction or Village Rites can be played, same card. Deadly Dispute, just ways to kind of get that card advantage engine going. Steal your opponent's thing, sacrifice it. You have Bombardment, Ajani, which is like probably the best 2-card punch you can do in this format. Cthulhian Nightmare also then lets you rebuy cards from your graveyard. There would be times where I'd be able to kind of loop multiple Marionette Apprentices and just get a bunch of bodies and then just drain my opponent out from there. The mana base is very painful in this deck. You're using mana confluences, a lot of shock lines to kind of achieve this multicolor. So that's one thing to kind of consider there. Laris Companion, you got Soul Guide Lantern for Graveyard Hate, Portable Holes, really good in the mirror, Fatal Push, just removal, Thoughtseize for hand hate, Juggernaut Peddler for hand hate, Molten Collapse, just flexible removal, and then Stone of Erich, really good in the mirror or anything like Yawgmoth, stuff like that. We then go to Izzet Wizards. So, Izzet Wizards. So the Wizards deck, there's a few different variations. There's a couple that had a higher win rate, but honestly, they were very oddly constructed. A lot of one-ofs, and it just seemed like this is a wizard, let me add it to the deck. This one was kind of interesting to me. We've gone off the Dreadhorde Arcanist and instead playing Snapcaster Mage, playing a little bit more tempo aggro, as opposed to Dreadhorde Arcanist, which a little bit harder to kind of get in an attack. There's no haste enabler with Reckless Charge in this one, so playing a little bit of a slower game. You have Treasure Cruises to replenish, Expressive Iteration, Consider, Flame of Anor, Wizard's Lightning, Play with Fire, so a little bit more control-oriented at times, and then you still have like your explosive draws of like Symmetry Sage into Slick Shot and to play a bunch of spells. I could see like Spell Pierce 1 or 2 being useful in this deck as well, because like you do have a little bit of a trade-off between Treasure Cruise and Snapcaster Mage. They're both vying for that same graveyard interaction. Maybe like down 1 Treasure Cruise, play a Spell Pierce could be reasonable. Your sideboard, you have Aether Gust, red and green decks, Surgical, very flexible, kind of eat at the graveyard and combo hate. Flame Sweep, really, really nice against these kind of go wide sack decks, energy decks. 2 damage each creature, and except for your creatures with flying, so leaves everything behind except your Snapcaster Mage, so Scar's Prowess, so get it out of range. Shove Aside is cheap removal, and Pithing Needle for activated abilities. We'll then go to Selesnya Devotion. This one's at 72%. This one here, it's basically the mono green devotion list with Elish Norn in the main. This is really strong against your opponent's ETB effects. So like a Johnny comes in, doesn't make a token. In the mirror, they don't get any of their ETB effects. So pretty strong in that regard. You have Bird's Paradise is another 1-drop here. Delighted Halfling, as well as, where is it? Utopia Sprawl as your mana accelerants. Couple Pelucranos, 1 Scrap Shooter is just a flexible way main board to destroy artifacts or enchantments. And kind of the core of the deck, you're trying to Kiora to tap untap Nykthos, generate a whole bunch of mana, Karn into a Karn Wishboard. Take over your opponent's turns with Mindslaver. Essence Reliquary can kind of reset some of your permanents and get you some value. Metamorph to copy things. Pestilence Cauldron, you fetch it, but then you cast Restorative Burst to rebuy stuff from your graveyard. You have like 16 mana, Karn and Kiora in the graveyard, Karn and Kiora on the battlefield. You can kind of loop them and effectively gain infinite life based on the amount you could click. Haywire Might, Artifact Enchantment Hate, One Ring for card advantage. Chroma's Memorial, if you can build enough of a board, you can fetch it, give your entire team haste, kill them that turn. Chalice of the Void can lock people out of certain spells. Levelers, general removal, liquid metal coating could shut off activated abilities, provided you have Karn out, could shut off lands and can blow up lands. Needle, activated abilities, portal, go over the top, blow things up. Skyship Sovereign, Sky Sovereign's Council Flagship. I said a bunch of words that were in this name, but nowhere near the name. It's general removal and Tormod's Crypt is cheap graveyard hate. We then go to Boros Energy. So this one's at 67%. So we have kind of some nerfed cards, Guide of Souls in here, Osselt's Pride being 2 mana as well. So this one's on the life gain package, Voice of the Blessed, as well as an Essence Chandler in here. You're probably better off just playing the Voice of the Blessed. It's just better than the Essence Chandler. What's interesting with this one here, we see Dewdrop Cure. Saw this on Best of One in the Amalia deck. Just a way to reanimate a bunch of creatures as well. Fragment, Galvanic Discharge as removal, Static Prisons, full Goblin Bombardment. Also interesting to see a Fountain Port in here. You generate a lot of tokens with this deck, so sack them, draw some cards, which is kind of nice with the deck. Sideboard, you got Get Lost, Invasion for Thoughtseize, so just cheap removal, Sun Cleanser for kind of the energy mirrors, Raven Charm, flexible kind of interaction, Surgical, Graveyard Hate, Meltdown. Probably don't need it, there's not like a huge amount of affinity right now, and it doesn't hit like the bombardments or stuff like that. Pithing Needle for activated abilities, Stone of Erich for the sacrifice decks. We then go to the Woodlands combo deck. So this deck here is looking to self-mill. So Faithless Looting, Malevolent Rumble, Cathartic Pyre, Cash Grab, all ways to put cards into your graveyard. And what you're trying to do is find your Shifting Woodlands, have your Woodlands enter as a copy of either Omniscience to free cast a bunch of Eldrazi from your hand, or you can have it copy God-Pharaoh's Gift. Ideally, you would have Ulamog the Defiler in your graveyard. You exile the Ulamog. While normally you get a 4/4, its ability sees the Ulamog in your exile, so it comes in with 10 counters and it gets haste, so you can annihilate or 10 them that turn. You have Atraxas, Elish Norns, Emeralds, like just all the Eldrazi friends are in there. The Traverse can also help you tutor for things like Shifting Woodlands, or if you have Omniscience, you can tutor out like one of your big Eldrazi. You have Flute for activated abilities, Surgical, Sweepers, and Anger and Brotherhoods. Fable, if they start attacking your graveyard a lot, you can do the Smuggler Surprise Fable angle, and then Haywire Might for more Artifact Enchantment Hate. And we have 2 more community decks. This one was pretty sweet. So this is from Pawn Decks. They went 35-17. It is an Abzan Reanimator deck. Again, apologies for this view. It's basically a Golgari Reanimator deck with a Sorin backup plan. So you have Sorin, Saint Elenda, Vein Ripper package. You have the Trolls to help you find mana, Generous Ent, a bunch of discard effects, Assemble the Team, Malevolent Rumble helps you discard. You have Perforator Croc as a way to kind of self-enable the discard and then get it back. Persist is your main reanimation spells. We don't have Reanimate in this format, but it's a way to kind of get things back. Now, notably, this is non-legendary, so you cannot get back your Saint Elendas or your Sheoldreds, but everything else you can get back with the deck. Sideboards, just various removal, hand hates, Calling Rituals, a sweeper, Flute for activated abilities, Phantasmal Extraction, just as more hand hate, Surgical, and then a bunch of Haywire Mites for graveyard hate. And then lastly, your boy did it again. Altheriax got to #1 Mythic, 41-3 with 4-color Sam combo. So it's basically, you got the energy package and kind of like the sack package mixed in with the Sam combo. So you have Birthing Ritual that can help you find your pieces. If you have Cauldron Familiar, Samwise, and Bartholomew, you can basically just keep sacking the Cauldron Familiar and then getting it back from your graveyard. So that way there, you just kind of drain your opponent out. You have a Johnny's, Amtraptor helps you find the combo, your Unlucky Witness, Goblin Trap Finders, all mixed in. Crawl Harpooner for flyers, Remorseful Cleric for graveyard hate, Haywire Might for artifact enchantment hate, and Fragment Reality as removal. So that's it for the week. Let me know what you think. We'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching.